G'day everyone, and welcome back to Digging Deeper Ag Chats with Al. I'm really excited to kick off 2026 with you. We've just finished our first full calendar year of podcasts, and I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's listened, shared an episode, sent a message, or stopped me for a chat. I genuinely appreciate it. This year we're aiming to bring you even more great guests with plenty of practical conversations you can take straight back to your own operation. We'll be featuring more local producers too. People right here in our region who are doing good things, having a crack, who've got great stories worth sharing. I'm also pleased to say that we've got some regular voices returning. Chelsea from Herd Solutions will be joining us on a monthly basis with veterinary updates and timely animal health advice. And Morgs from Elders is back as well, committed to a monthly livestock market update to help us make sense of what's happening and what it might mean on farm. So whether you're listening in the ute, on the tractor or in the yards, welcome back. I'm glad you're here and I hope you enjoy what we've got coming in 2026. Welcome everyone to Digging Deeper. We have stud principal here of Cashmore Oakleigh. John, how you going?
Yeah, I'm very good. Yeah.
You're a long way from home at the minute.
Yeah.
Where's home base for you?
Home base for me is Cashmore in Western Victoria, so just sort of down on the coast, just between Portland and Mount Gambier. So yeah, some high rainfall country and yeah, pretty safe sort of soft country, yeah.
Now we're going to talk about your sheep enterprise in a little minute and the stud, but we always like to go way back to why agriculture. When did the bug catch you, and what's your journey been like?
I guess I've got a bit of a family history that way. My grandfather was the manager of the Borthwick's Meatworks back in the 50s. Managed 1,000 men, 4 of them. Quite a big business. He did that for a long time. My father and my uncle, 3 uncles, all were farmers. So I drifted that way. My mother's family were botanists. I've been a naturalist, I guess. I'm a bird watcher. I'm an environmentalist. I'm always curious. So I guess if you've got all those, I'm a hunter. So if you've got a hunter's eye, you're always watching and trying to learn and make things grow and develop. So agriculture came my way.
So you grew up on a farm?
Yeah, grew up on a farm. Yeah, I'm oldest of 4 and had a pretty typical, I guess, 1964 model upbringing. Good sound education, solid family. And also was given the opportunity at a reasonable young age to try and experiment and try and make those mistakes young fellas make, which has been something I'll do with my kids too.
Now you're predominantly sheep now. Growing up, were you a sheep producer, cattle?
Yeah, we run about 90% sheep, 10% cattle. So we run about 7,000 adult ewes and nearly 3,000 ewe lambs each year. So I think we'll produce about 13,000 lambs this year off the place. And we run about 100 cows with, a total herd of about 350 cattle. So
let's talk about that stud. You, off the farm, I understand you went off to uni to get an ag degree, is that right?
Yeah, I went to Longerenong Ag College. I did 3 years up there, did ag science. While I was there, I guess I had access to a library. And I used that library to learn. I had a couple of very good educators up there that when I was doing a major or third year trial, I made a presentation there, and one of the questions that was asked of me, John, how does a single ram represent a bloodline? So I actually made a big mistake in that trial and was chipped on it, which was correct. So I've used that as, I guess, a bit of a stepping stone or an incentive to actually make sure that I always use data in the future very carefully. And so that's really what I've done for a long period of time. So it was a fundamental comment that was completely right. Yeah, so I've taken that to heart.
So all those years ago, that simple sentence has stuck with you and is one of the mantras I guess you follow to this day.
Exactly right. The other good thing that happened in that period of time was our first year tour was down to the Hamilton PVI. Or DPI there at the time, and Leo Cummins was the head of animal production there at the time, and I met Leo, who's got an encyclopedic knowledge of scientific manuals, etc. So I could ask him any sort of question. He's been a mentor of mine. I've had 2 in my life in this whole program that have been very important. He's been one that's always been there, and if I asked a question, he could give me something and say, this paper was written in 85 by Smith, Jones and Jackson, and this is what they answered, but this is what they didn't answer. So I had someone at TAP like that. And the other one was Rob Banks, who was the first LambPlan manager for 10 years. So he's been a great mentor of mine. So I was lucky enough to have 2 incredibly intelligent and resourceful people at my hand. So I've just often tried to just do what they said.
Now, I'm interested, whenever I talk to stud producers, Did you set out to become a stud producer, or did you start breeding your own rams and the next door neighbour said, I want some of those rams, and it snowballed from there?
My parents had bred Dorset Horns and Pole Dorsets through the 60s and the 70s, so I'd had an interest in doing those sorts of things. I'd been a kid breeding various farm animals. I did have a very large pigeon loft from the time I was like 8 to 18, where I did all sorts of experiments and bred for size and shape and colour. So a lot of my genetic understanding comes back from breeding pigeons. And I think the next thing that happened was I went overseas in 88, and I was looking to start performance recording, and at the time Australia didn't have much performance recording, only a little bit through the New South Wales DPI. And when I came back, I was about to go and start recording with the UK system, but then LambPlan started about 1990. So I've been lucky enough to grow with the whole program all the way through. And I guess the impetus for the performance recording is quite simple, and that was that I didn't want to have the same animals at the end of my farming career as at the start of my farming career. I needed different animals. I could see that. And it's a very simple statement, but you must live it every day.
I guess it's hard over the years. There's small changes year on year. What's some of the bigger changes that you've seen when you reflect back to the start?
Well, there's 100 different columns we could select sheep on now. Probably we started with only 2 or 3 traits. We started with weight, fat, and muscle, and that was for the terminal size. And then by the time, that was 1990, by the time we get to 94, we start to pick up reproduction, and we could start breeding self-replacing animals. And then we added fecal egg count. So I'd been, Don and myself, my ram breeding partner, had been pushing for that.
When did that come in? That's fairly new.
It would have been in the 90s, and at the time it was thought that you actually probably couldn't even make high performance sheep have low fecal egg counts, and that was because some of the animals out of New Zealand had been bred for high growth but under a heavy drenching program, like drench once a month. Mm-hmm. And so those animals were coming over with great growth rates, but they were plus 200% above breed average for egg output. So now we've got animals now that are like high growth rates now that are like minus 100%. Incredibly different animals, amazingly different, 300% apart. The difference between live animals and dead animals. Yeah, so that was one of them. Whole range of traits. Adult weights, we took a lot of adult weights, 40 or 50,000. Don and I had in our backlot of data, and then when that rolled through, we were ready to use it. So we'd always been trying to be ahead of the game. You get up and deal with today, but you're actually looking, where are we 5 years out? I only ever think 5 years out. How do I get there? Today's today. That's operational. Where's strategic thinking taking us? What's happening tomorrow? And
I remember talking to you once before, and you said record everything because you don't know when you're going to use it. You still record a lot of information on your sheep every year. What sort of records are you keeping, like currently? What's the sort of the thing that you're looking at?
Well, you keep records that give you the best economic bang for your buck in a cost-effective way. So, we pick up birth weight and 100-day weight, 200-day weight, 12-month weight, 2-year weight, adult weights all the way through, fat and muscle. We pick internal parasites. We pick up reproduction. We pick up lambing ease. We pick up maternal behaviour score. We pick up fecal egg count. I've been doing quite a lot of work on tails. We've got 40,000 tail lengths in a database at the moment, and we've now got we've got tail EBVs.
DAG scores as well?
DAG scores as well, yeah. So we've done that, and then of course there's also the shedding side of things, where we've picked up a lot of shedding scores, breeding values, or shedding scores, phenotypes now. And I guess you could then say we then move into genomics, where I don't know how many genomic tests I've done, but every time you test an animal, you get 56,000 markers on it, 56,000 SNPs. So all of a sudden, it just becomes enormous, the amount of data you got, data points.
Now, another thing we mentioned at the start, but you're a composite stud and a Dorset stud, and you also do maternal and terminal size.
Yep.
And probably the more recent one, you're venturing out into the Nudie. How long have you been breeding the Nudies for?
Back in 2003, I bought some sheep that had shedding genes in them, and then 2007 we started recording those. So that's 19 years now. It's about 25,000 animals we've probably put through the system from memory. When you start those programs, it's very interesting. I've done it 4 times in my life now. That the the first couple of years are crazy because you've got all these unrecorded animals that have they're not as nice as you'd like them to be. And so you have a fair bit of attrition out of them. And about the fourth year, everything settles down. And you actually get some animals coming through that are actually from your decisions a year or two earlier. About year 4, it settles down and you start to get your house in order. So that's, we've been running them on there for that long.
Yeah, what's been the challenge with the nudies? Because what I understand is performance-wise, they're still a bit back from the maternals and terminal size, is that right?
Yeah, I guess the challenge has been there's another whole range of traits. So you've got a full maternal animal, plus then we had to actually do a little bit of, I guess, structural stuff. We had to fix a few feet up and we had to fix a few bodies up, and then we had to fix a bit of shedding up, and then we had to fix a bit of performance up. So they've just got a few extra bells and whistles to them. So they've certainly been very challenging that way. From a production point of view, if you look at all the I guess what we call the nudie animals, we'll call them southern shedding sheep. There's a few people breeding them, myself and a few others. They probably hang around the 60 to 75% percentile mark on the maternal database. So they're about $10 or $15 a ewe mated behind the middle part of the maternal database. However, they don't need shearing. So it's really they're very good sound functional animals now. They're changing every year. People are working on them. I'm working on them, of course. But they just probably haven't quite got that real get up and go like the maternal composites have got. That's just a sheer weight of numbers thing. If you think about it, the maternal composites with a New Zealand Coopworth history from 1950, and then the Australian database from 1990 on, they might have 10 to 12 million animals in their background, 70 years of performance. Then we've got these shedding animals we're dealing with in Australia that have got a much shorter period of time of energy and effort into them and a lot less animals. So just really statistics. We're really talking about the results of statistics.
Are we going to close the gap on them?
I'm working very hard at that. Yeah, we've got nudie rams out into the 190s now. We just haven't quite got enough of them. So it's really just putting nose to the grindstone, making more of those high quality animals, using the technology to take the best of the maternals and put them into the nudies, and then take the wool off them. So there's always going to be a run of DNA that comes from the maternals into the nudies, because that's where they are. If we can get the nudies up where the maternals are, well, the DNA runs back the other way. So it's quite simple when you think about it. It just takes time and effort to do it.
Now, for the listeners, you might have heard me talking before about the Gippsland trial that we've run here at the Gippsland Agriculture Group, where you got producers that could enter 10 lambs, and they grow on improved pastures for about 10 or 12 weeks, and then taken down to Radford, and carcass scores got given. And you'll be pleased to know that there was Cashmore blood in the top, out of the top 5, there was Cashmore blood in 3 of them. And so the Cashmore actually do really well in this area. Why would you say that, because you've got a few clients up here that buy rams down here, Gippsland, how much different is it to your area, and why are the sheep doing so well down this end?
The environment I run them in is 8:30 rainfall, cold, wet, muddy winters. Probably I don't drench them enough, so there's a few that don't make it through the system too well. So you're always buying survivors. The Oakleigh part of Cashmore Oakleigh, Don joins about a month earlier than me on a bit of limestone country. He doesn't run his as well as he should either. So we've always been very commercial in our focus. There's no prisoners taken ever. And that, it takes a long time, but you start hearing comments over the fence, they survive, they do well, they're tardy, they're tough. These animals are about probably 10 years ahead of the rest of the industry on internal parasites, and they've been hammered pretty hard. So that's why I guess they're sound and functional that way. One of the reasons they would have done quite well in the trials is carcass yield. All the Cashmore animals have been quite good in the muscle area there. So we've always had good muscle in them, and that's because there's a positive correlation between reproduction rate and internal parasites. So you're starting to get things going the direction you want. Probably the last thing would be they've just got bigger indexes than the others, and it all just adds. If you just keep adding index, you put the numbers on the paper and you put them in the paddock, you get the results. If you don't put the number on the paper, you won't get the results. You can think you will, but you won't get them. So there's no free lunches out there.
No, that's very true. The other thing that I see, one of the biggest benefits that a lot of producers around here have switched over to the composites is the ability to self-replace. So we've got a lot of producers in this area self-replacing true maiden lambs, and then they're almost lambing before they're even 12 months old themselves. So do you join ewe lambs down your way?
Yeah, both of our operations, Cashmore Oakleigh, have both been joining ewe lambs for as long as we can. We just join all our ewe lambs because it's a seed stock operation, so it's a data collection business really. That's what we're doing. And then I guess one of the things that's come out of that too recently is that we've, in the last probably 8 or 9 years, we've had one of the EBVs called yielding weaning rate. So that's the weaning rate of a ewe lamb to get in lamb. The interesting one there is that conception rate in ewe lambs is highly heritable. So what used to happen was that if you had a look at a mob of ewe lambs that have been preg tested and their fetuses counted, because the bigger ones have more multiples, you'd see that the triplet ewe lambs would be the biggest, the twins would be the next biggest, the singles would be a bit smaller, and then all the empty ones are small. However, in the empty ones, there's always some big ones. What are they? They're actually the family lines with late puberty. Right. So that's what they are. So that was observant. We could observe that and go, we knew what they were. Now by using highly heritable trait, yielding weaning rate, and operating and using that, all those big ewes, those 50 kilo ewe lambs that didn't get in lamb, aren't in that empty pen. They're not in your flocks anymore. So there's been a massive change quietly going on in all these maternal composite flocks over the country in the last 10 years. So as a seed stock breeder, we hear things come back over the fence, and that is that we sometimes now hear guys who preg test big runs of ewe lambs, 5,000 ewe lambs, they preg test 160%. Unheard of, but now that is starting to happen. So we just hear these numbers go up and up and up.
So what's that index on puberty? Is there an index for puberty?
No, it's just really conception. So yielding weaning rate has got 3 parts to it. It's got conception, it's got litter size, and then it's got ewe rearing ability. So it's broken into 3 component traits. So yeah, that's really what happened. If you want to join ewe lambs, just pick yielding weaning rate, and that'll start going up.
Yep. So high weaning rate.
Yeah, high yielding weaning rate. Yep.
You just mentioned before we came in here about some marking rates. Not marking rates. Sorry, some scanning rates. What are some scanning rates of your sheep you've been getting feedback on the last couple of weeks?
I just heard north of Hamilton at Glen Thompson the other day, a chap preg tested his adult ewes and they did 180% with no triplet counting. So if you counted triplets in those, it's probably around 192, 193. We haven't done ours yet, but I expect ours will be certainly at the highest as we've had for quite some time, looking at their condition score. Down here in Gippsland, I heard one recently on 1,000 ewes that preg tested 199. So what happens with sheep is that because they're so sensitive to body weight condition score, is that they cycle. If you have a hard season, they have less lambs, and then while they're just rearing a single, or more of them are rearing a single, then they build their weight up, their condition score goes up, and then they'll have more the next year. So the sensitivity of that in our flock is the condition score on a Cashmore ewe is about 15 kilos live weight, and that's worth about 18% lambs at preg test. So it's about 1.3% lambs per kilogram change in weight on an adult ewe.
Right.
So you can really dial sheep up these days if you think about it. You say, oh, those ewes, I want them at that, and that. That's what you're going to get.
And what sort of, when we go further down track, marking rates, because it doesn't matter how many we scan, it's what we mark, what sort of acceptable losses, I guess, up to marking?
That's a good one, Al. That one seems to be lifting all the time, in conversation. We're starting to hear people with singles that are doing 95 or 96% marked out of a mob of singles. We're probably now starting to hear, high 80s for, high 80s to low 90s for twins. And the triplet one's always quite variable, but I mean, you might be lucky enough to get a 80 out of a triplet mob, and if you don't do it so good, you might only get a 65 or 70. So there's sort of the numbers. Highly dependent on season, condition score of the ewe, skills of the operator, putting the ewe lambs the ewes in a paddock so that they've got everything going right for them, right condition score. So
you wouldn't get the East Coast lows down your way, but we get these East Coast lows come down, and sometimes it lands in the middle of lamb in, and that can be disaster up here. Whereas we had a really soft lamb in last year. Our numbers were very much what you just said then, actually.
Yeah.
So smaller paddocks, decent feed, and really kind conditions for lambing. So
Yeah, good, happy days for sheep farmers.
yeah. Sometimes takes a lot of factors to go right to get those good results. Well, we really appreciate you coming down. Is there anything else you want to say? I've got one more question before we finish, unless you've got some other things to say.
No, that's good. Yeah, you go on.
All right, so one more question we always ask our guests at the end of the show is, if you could go back and visit a young John Keilor, what advice would you give yourself in either farming or life?
What would I give? Good advice given to me was don't work too much. Make sure you live life, while you're living life. So I did a fair bit of work when I was a young fella, but I've always been lucky enough to have outside interests. So I thought I balanced it okay, but others might not say that. Be appreciative of all the people around you that support you and allow you to express yourself however you are. So I've been very, very lucky there in having a strong family group and friends that have just sort of let me somewhat indulge myself in my passions. So yeah, I'm very appreciative of that.
Yeah, well, thanks for stopping by, and thanks for being kind enough to jump in and record this. I know the sheep producers in the area are going to get a lot out of it, and we'll see you over at your ram sale. You want to just mention actually when your rams and new sales are, if anyone's interested? The first week of October, we've got a ram sale on Cashmore Oakleigh. We'll have about 500 maternal rams there in the top 4 percentile band. I think we'll have about 250 nudies there and 40 terminals. And then we run two ewe sales on Auctions Plus. We run the first week of November and the first week of December for our own production and also clients. So sometimes that's got 6,000 or 8,000 ewes, sometimes 10,000 each sale, and those ewes go right over southern Australia, have for a long time. So always open to inquiries, happy to have a chat and share a bit of knowledge and remain curious. I appreciate it. Thanks very much for coming in, and thanks for listening. All right, bye for now. A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.